So a little while ago, I went to use resin, and let's just say I made a bit of a mistake. I mixed together 3 liters of the resin for a project and poured it into a mold that I didn't test for leaks. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 is I made the stupid idea of blocking the leaking holes with rubber gloves. Pro tip, never do that. The resin just leaked everywhere. However, I did manage to salvage a little bit of it. Not enough for that project, but still quite a bit. Considering the resin cost me $130 and this is all I had left, I didn't want it to go to waste. So today I'm going to try and save it and use as much of it as I can by making 3 things. This folding knife, this really cool knife that I found online. I think it's also still a folding knife. The third thing is a surprise. You guys are going to have to wait till the end to find out. Let's get to work on the first knife. Okay, so this is a normal folding knife. It's actually my favorite knife I own. So I'm going to try and recreate it. Since there's not much resin left, I'm only going to make the blade out of resin. The handle will be wood and metal. I started with the 2 metal plates and cut them to shape. Once I had a rough outline, I also needed to cut a slit into one of the sides. This will act as a stopper and it will keep the knife open and stop it from closing on my fingers. After that, I need to clean out the edges. With both of them done, we can move on to the next part, and that would be the bulk of the handle. I had the spare piece of jarrah wood just lying around that was just big enough, so I cut it out and started sanding. But I wasn't just sanding the outline, I was thinning the wood down by a lot. There are definitely better ways and cleaner ways of doing this that would waste way less wood, but unfortunately I just don't have the right tools at the moment, so this is just gonna have to work. And to be fair, it did a good job, it just took a while. Next up was the resin blade, but before I could cut the sharp edge, I needed to somehow remove it from the metal sheet it cured on. There was no way of doing it by hand, so hammer and chisel would have to do it. It was so satisfying watching it pop off the metal. Sliding the chisel underneath and slowly lifting it was almost worth ruining this resin project. I was trying to get all the resin to come off in one piece, but of course it snapped right at the end. And it was exactly the part I was going to use. Oh well, at least the resin is off the metal and that's all that mattered. I traced out the shape I was happy with and started cutting. The resin block was a bit of a weird shape, so at first cutting it was a little hard, but once I had trimmed it down to a smaller rectangle, cutting it was easy. I took my time cutting as accurately as I could before grabbing up the grinder and doing the final shaping there. With the grinder I made it thinner and I also gave it that sharp edge. I didn't want to sand much because it made a huge mess. And that's why at the end I gave it a wash, and now you can really see that cool icy clear finish. Is it just me or does the blade look like ice? With all the parts of the knife made, it was time to put everything together. To do that I just needed to drill 3 holes into each part of the handle. This part was tricky. I had to line everything up perfectly. The knife wouldn't work if the holes didn't line up. In total, I needed to drill 9 holes, and surprisingly, I got all the holes to line up first try. Normally I don't show this, but I mess up a lot. I just needed to add a hole into the blade. This might annoy some people, but the hole isn't going to be in the center. It's actually going to be as close to one side as I can get it. Anyway, I drilled the hole and we could see the folding knife mechanism working, but it worked a little too well. At the moment, there's nothing stopping the blade from folding past where we needed to stop. So next we'll be adding an extra bit of metal to act as a stopper. Also notice how it doesn't go through the handle as well. I want that clean look to my knife. So I'm going to try my hardest to make it only be between the metal and not exceed past the handle. Once again, lining everything up is key, so I connected the metal before marking a dot and drilling a hole. I slid a bolt in to test it. Later I'm going to add a nut to make it thicker, but this is good enough. It works as a stopper, but now the knife won't shut, so we have to make one final adjustment on the blade. I wasn't happy with how thick the handle was. A knife is meant to be thin and slick. Mine was still quite a bit chunky, so I'll sand it down again. Also, I didn't round off the edges, I'm going to come back and do that at the very end. So back to the stopper. Since the metal I'm using is very thin, the stopper would just fall out. So I'm going to drill halfway into the wood to give the stopper more to hold on to, but not enough for it to go all the way through the handle. Speaking of the stopper, I'm just going to be using a bolt with a nut in the middle of it. But before I can add that in, I need to remove the end of the bolt. I added the nut, and now it works. It was just the finishing touches to go. The bolts holding the knife together extruded out of the handle, so I'm just going to drill a little bit into the wood again to make it flush. It was near completion, pretty much done everything, and you could see how the knife's going to work. You can see the locking mechanism working. By pushing the metal to the side, you can close the knife. You can see the stopper in place and it's not falling out. You may have noticed this little bit of resin sticking out. You can flick that to open the knife, and the knife had a really good feel to it. But it wasn't done yet. There was just a few little things I needed to do, such as rounding off the edges. For the last time I got out the grinder and gave it a clean look. Doing the sanding now with the metal in between the wood will also make sure the metal is the same shape as the wood. I also accidentally sanded away a lot of the bolts, so they're also now to the same shape as the handle, which I guess is a good thing. A happy accident, just like me. It was just time to put the knife together. One thing I didn't mention is the handle is all burned, and that's on purpose. You see, when I was grinding it earlier, because it's Jarrah, the Jarrah just started burning. I think that's because I'm not supposed to use a grinder on it. But anyway, it looks really nice, and it also felt really nice to hold. The only major difference is the resin is thicker than the real blade. Besides that, it would have been a really good replica. So the blade will open and it will close. But the real question is, does resin work as a blade? Let's find out. To test the sharpness, I got an apple. I'll test both slashing and stabbing, and surprisingly the resin did really well. It was quite sharp. Obviously it's not as good as a metal one, but it would still cut. I was a little scared of cutting my hand because, well, you're not supposed to hold stuff when you're testing the sharpness. So I put it on the floor and started putting some effort behind my swings, and it cut into the apple with no issue. I would say this knife was a success. I had no idea what to test the knife on. I know you're meant to test it on paper, but it's not sharp enough to cut paper cleanly. And if I don't show that, well, then you guys will think my knife is better than it actually is. Anyway, there's still a lot of resin left over, so we're going to put the knife away for now, and we're going to start on the next knife, which is a bit more of a funky one. I have no idea what to call this knife, but I found it on YouTube by Koss. Go check out his video. He made it way better than I did. So to start, we will use this steel. By dropping it on the table, it will become 4 pieces. These are the parts that will make up the handle. Before doing anything with the handle, we're going to go back to the resin. I drew the knife onto the brick and started cutting. It was the same process as last time, it was just a different shape. This time I tried to make the blade a little bit thinner, and everything was going great until the very end. I accidentally sanded a little too much off the end, and now it's not a perfectly straight edge. But that shouldn't really affect the outcome of the blade, so we can move on to sharpening it. Oh, I also gave it a clean when I was done. So, the metal. I forgot to add these 2 parts, so I'm going to quickly chop those out. These are the one parts of the handle we won't see. Now here's one of the parts I cut out earlier. I needed to make a small adjustment to them. You see, the way this is going to work is these parts are going to lift up, but with the corners on, they're just going to get in the way and stop it from working. Luckily, this is a really easy fix. So now we can actually start putting all the pieces together. I marked a dot on the smallest piece and clamped it to its matching piece to ensure both the holes were in the same place. I drilled another hole in this bit of metal that will connect to it, using the same clamping method to make sure it was the same on both parts. This is how the moving is going to look. It's pretty basic. I added 2 more holes into the larger pieces of metal. These are the ones that are going to connect to the resin. I went and got the last metal component and drilled holes in that too. Only this time I put 3 holes, and these holes are a lot smaller. You'll see why in a minute. I needed to match these holes on both pieces. Everything I do on one piece I need to do to its matching piece. And then I also had to line these 3 holes up on the smaller piece from earlier. So then I knew where to drill. I got a bit of wire, pushed it through the hole and hammered it to mark the metal. Just like the last knife, I needed all the holes to line up, so I had to take care. I measured once and prayed it worked. The next part I didn't really film that well, but I'm using pegs to hold the metal into place. By using metal wire going through the holes, I can hammer it, and this will expand the metal just enough that it will be really hard for the metal to fall apart. It's not impossible for it to come undone, but it's still very strong and it will last. In fact, I used this when I was making my Assassin's Creed Hidden Blade. Go check out the video. We can really see the knife working now, but it would look a lot better with the blade. That's much better. You can see just how the mechanism is going to work. We just need to work on the blade again, but before working on the resin, we just need to drill one more hole, and I should have drilled this hole before connecting the metal together. To stop the metal from bending inwards when I drill, I'm just going to add a little bit of scrap in between the pieces. I put the scrap pieces in and started drilling. And that's all the holes done. I wasn't too happy with how the metal was looking though. I wanted to make it look shiny. I sanded away the top layer of metal. This will make it shiny and give it that classic metal look, but this will also make the metal start to rust. There's a few ways of stopping the rust, but the easiest is just to put machine oil on it. Okay, moving on to the blade. First things first, I'm going to drill a hole to connect to the moving part. Now this next step is going to be a little tricky. I need to cut a perfectly straight line in the middle. Since I don't have a lathe, this is actually going to be really hard. So I drilled one hole at each end of the blade and drew a line. I did this so I know where to start cutting and where to stop. I'm going to be using my router to cut this line, but it wasn't working the way you're supposed to use the router. I was a bit stumped here and I wasn't entirely sure what to do, but after a little bit of thinking, I can just put the router on its side, hold down the button and guide the resin by hand. Probably not the safest way, and it also didn't give the best results, but I didn't really have any other way to do this, and luckily it worked. So all I had to do now is cut off the extra bolts sticking out the back, and I called it good. This is definitely one of the more unique things I've made. It's a shame I didn't get the line straight, but oh well. It still worked, and overall it still looks pretty cool. But the real question is, does it cut like the other knife? Also, here it is next to the knife. It's a little bit smaller and it's a lot heavier, obviously because it's mostly metal. Okay, time to test it on an apple that I totally didn't drop and that isn't damaged. It did a really good job slicing it. It's kind of hard to see on camera because of how thin the edge is, but I promise you it's doing a good job. Once again, not testing on paper, you know why. I put it on the ground and really went at it again. The apple has definitely seen better days. Once again, I'm going to say this knife is a success. After all that testing, the folding mechanism still worked, and it's time to move on to the last build. But just before that, I wanted to say a big thank you. I hit 10,000 subscribers. This channel has come so far, from never making anything before starting it, to making a full suit of armor on my second build. I've been able to make my creations come to life, one by one. This channel has made me so happy, and I am happy to see other people enjoying it the same way I do. I hope to one day not only hit 100,000 subs, but also make this my full-time job. I've made some pretty wild stuff and I have more on the way. Also, side note, at some point I want to start a gaming channel and also start streaming, but for now I'm going to mainly focus on the builds. If you guys like the videos, subscribe, and if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. I read all of the comments. If you guys leave an idea, it might not be my next build, but if I like it, I'll definitely add it to the list, and do it as soon as I can. I hope you guys have enjoyed this montage of me making, testing, burning myself, and making me look dumb. And to finish it off, here's a quick collection of my favourite moments. But anyway, let's get back to the video. If you guys didn't already guess, the last build is going to be a 10,000 subscriber plaque. This was a really simple and easy build. I just cut this bit of wood off the end of a plank. It chipped a little bit, but that's okay. After I sand it down, it'll look good. Speaking of which, that's what I did next. I sanded away the corners, making it round. I also sanded each edge to make that a little round as well, as I feel like a rounded edge looks a little nicer than a sharp edge. With the shape done, I took it inside and finished drawing the design. I then got out the router again. This time I'm going to be using it properly, and I'm going to be using it to carve out the play button. I didn't need to go too deep, just enough for the resin to sit in it. The indent of the wood will also act as an outline when it's done. With the words and the numbers, I got out my wood burner. I didn't want to go too thick with the lettering. I wanted to go just enough that you could read it. I wanted it to be quite subtle. The plaque was almost done. It was just time for the resin. This is all the resin that was left, just enough for this play button. I cut off the extra bits of resin to get a triangle. It wasn't quite a perfect triangle, it also wasn't the right shape, so I sanded it down until it was. Next was rounding off the corners. On the real play button, the 1 million subscriber button, the edges of the play button is curved, and that's the look I was going for. And for the last time, I washed the resin so you could see that nice finish. It was time to glue it into place. I'm going to be using Gorilla Glue. And somehow I forgot to actually film myself gluing it into place, so just imagine that. And here it is, 10,000. 10,000 of you legends. You guys are making my dreams come true. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.